This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast revisiting television sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between. This week, Come Back, Mrs. Noah, episodes 1 and 2.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? What is it?
It's the Earth.
Where's England?
Should be coming round again in a minute. Yeah, just north of Africa, surrounded by the oil slick.
Oh, didn't we get up here quick? When will we go back?
But it might be quite a few days.
Might even be a few weeks.
A few weeks?
I'm afraid this has come as a bit of a shock to you, Mrs. Noah.
It's come as a bit of a shock to all of us, isn't it?
I don't think it does. I've left a chicken in the oven.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast with a stiff upper lip. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
I have a question for both of you because we have a guest here, which we'll introduce in a second. I've said this many, many times, but is this the worst thing we've ever seen?
No.
No? You don't think it's the worst thing?
No, I don't think so.
Nico, is this the worst thing you've ever seen?
It was objectively quite terrible.
Listen, Bionic Woman was worse than this.
You think Bionic Woman was worse than this?
Whoa, yeah, 100%.
Oh, wow.
This was only 20 minutes long.
That's true. It's short.
All right. Well, Jordan, as you mentioned, we have a guest with us, a returning guest. Welcome back to the show, Nico.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me back.
What was the last show you were on for? What did we make you watch last time?
The Day of the Triffids.
Ah, yes, Day of the Triffids.
He's our British expert.
It's true. I'm, half, therefore, the most European and exotic people you know.
Yeah, did you know that Jordan holds you personally responsible for what he calls your people's creations?
Honestly, we'll talk about it in a second, but this show is simultaneously the most British and the most offensively British thing that I've ever seen.
I have a theory that based on watching this show and their obsession with weirdly sexual gags, that no one in Britain had sex until about 1982.
That seems about accurate,
I mean, the sexual stuff didn't bother me as much as the racist stuff.
It was the racist, and, there was a lot of fawning and burping as, like, that big punchlines.
The audience loved it.
Hey.
Do you think that audience is live?
No, that audience is recorded later. Now, I don't know what they pumped into these people, but I've never laughed as hard as anyone in that audience has laughed at any of these gags.
All right. Well, we're watching a BBC series from 1978 called Come Back, Mrs. Noah. Were either of you aware of this series? Do you have any concept of this existing?
I don't, but I think Nico's parents still watch it.
It's true. I grew up with it. We had a poster on my bedroom wall.
It's of Mrs. Noah?
Of Mrs. Noah and the spin-off series Go Away, Mr. Noah.
Well, it aired from December 13th, 1977 to August 14th, 1978. And while that was on television, this is what was happening in the world around it. I know you love this part, George.
I do.
This is what you're waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
July 21st, 1978, Josh Hartnett is born.
And the world was never the same.
That's a poster you had on your wall, right, Jordan?
That's true.
Jordan, I'm shocked you know who Josh Hartnett is.
Too recent for him?
All right, everyone.
I actually saw him in a play in the West End. He was the Tom Cruise role in Rain Man.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
There was a play of Rain Man?
Yeah, they made a play of it.
Weird.
Yeah, he was okay.
July 25th, 1978, the first test tube baby is born, also in the UK.
Oh, that is interesting.
Oh, well, and here I am.
July 28th, 1978, Animal House released in theaters.
Animal House. A very different comedy than this.
And August 6th, 1978, Pope Paul VI dies.
And that's just before Pope John? Pope John
Hey,
Paul?
I've never heard of this Pope. I didn't know about him, so this is news to me.
Honestly, Pope Paul VI, my number 2 Pope of all time.
Number 2 Pope.
Number 2 Pope.
Who's number 1?
Leo the 13th.
Ah.
What's he most famous for?
I have Some Catholic stuff. I don't know. It was all in Latin. It's hard to follow.
Listen, Catholic and their sex is Jordan's favorite topic. He loves to get into it. All right. And one last thing, just for the Continuum Drag listeners and Jordan. The pilot for Come Home, Mrs. Noah premiered during another show we watched. Can you guess, Jordan?
1978. What's the Invisible show?
Oh,
Gemini Man?
no, it's a corollary, Jordan. This is coming out the same time as Quark.
Oh, it's Quark. It's very funny. Nico, you probably don't know this, but we watched a show that's very similar to this. Only it's a comedy set in space, but it's a space janitor who cleans up space garbage.
I actually listened to one of your episodes on that.
Just to get ready for this.
That was the first time. I was like, I'll do some research and I'll listen to them talk about Quark.
It just told me that in 1978, around this time, the world was demanding a comedy about people in space.
I guess, huh?
And they regretted their decision to demand it. All right, let's get into the first episode. Here's the IMDb summary for episode 1, Pilot. In 2050, Mrs. Noah is taking a tour of Britain's latest space station, the Britannia 7, when she and several of her companions are accidentally launched into space. And that was courtesy of BGP.
BGP. Do you think it's British Petroleum?
I don't know. Perhaps.
Well, they make a joke later on in the show about how all of Europe is an oil slick. So actually, that could very well be it.
I mean, that is a weird running gag, because when this show starts off, I guess we're watching a broadcast of a news program called Far and Wide, which, is this a real news program?
Well, so I looked at the Wikipedia. It's apparently a parody of Nationwide, which was a news magazine show.
I see.
Yeah.
And we're watching the 7,581st edition on June 22nd, 2050. Very specific.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they start off by listing a bunch of stories in the news of the day, which I guess these stories are all one of them I could tell was a joke, but the other two I was unclear, but based on the laughter was my only indication these were jokes.
I mean, you could say that about most of the things in this show. The only way you know that they're a joke is that the audience is laughing, but you're left going, what did they say? I don't even know what the joke is.
I will say they make a Thatcher gag in that I had a very hearty chuckle to.
There you go. Because the news of the day is Margaret Thatcher is getting a memorial in Red Square, Moscow, which was the only joke I could identify.
Yeah.
But the other two were the German mark is surviving and graffiti in the channel tunnel. And I was like, are those two things jokes?
I think the joke about Germany was that Germany is not the economic power that they are at this time. I think that's the joke. It's barely a joke.
And then the other one was it would be hard to do graffiti in the channel tunnel.
I think that's it, yeah.
Or that there's graffiti in all tunnels, so isn't that funny?
Either way, the audience loves it. They're falling off their chairs.
But the big story in this newscast is the Britannia 7, a yet-to-be-launched space station shaped like a big old wheel with spokes, like a big old bicycle wheel. And it was built with sterling surplus from the North Sea oil, which I guess that is also a joke, that there is oil in the North Sea, which is, I guess, why it's also surrounded in oil slicks.
No, that's actually a real thing. I didn't really get that gag at all because, North Sea oil is a thing, and that's kind of the whole bedrock of Scottish independence. Is we have our own oil, we'll be fine.
They make the joke later. I think Luke, you mentioned it that it has this oil rig or whatever has exploded, and so most of Europe is now under an oil slick. Because I think they say England just north of Africa or something like that.
Yeah, and England is covered in an oil slick. Yeah.
But somehow it doesn't seem to affect anyone in I mean, maybe it's asking too much for this show, but everything just still seems like 1970s England. No one's having a bad effect from this.
I mean, the world building is mostly jokes and not consistent. But this was the one that the audience laughed at so hard that I just couldn't. I mean, it was funny to me how hard the audience laughed at this. But the space station has been built by the Pontefract International Space Complex, or as it's better known, its acronym, PISC.
They laugh every time at this. And I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, the joke is that it kind of sounds like piss. That's the joke?
I don't know if it's that or if it's when that sound you make when you dismiss someone, they're like, oh, psk.
Oh. Either way, I don't think it's that funny. But again, the audience is tearing the place apart laughing.
Anytime they say PISC.
Every time they just they can't get enough of that.
The newscast throws to our BBC roving reporter Clive Cunliffe. Cunliffe, maybe that's it. And he's broadcasting live from the launch site. He's going to be doing a tour of the space station with the titular character Mrs. Gertrude Noah, winner of Modern Housewife magazine's cooking competition. I think she won. Didn't they say she won for like some sort of roundy, perhaps?
She made the best Bakewell tart.
Oh, there you go.
Everyone likes a Bakewell.
It's a staple food.
And we know it's the future because they start showing off all of these smart devices they have. For instance, they have a, as they call it, an auto self-seeking electronic camera, which records the BBC reporter, which they tell us it's automatic because it just focuses in on the most exciting thing it sees. And what's the most exciting things this camera can see?
Nico?
Boobs.
Mrs. Gertrude Noah's bust is it's very excited to zoom in on her bust.
And to show it like little flaps on the sides, like it's got fins. It's like flapping in excitement.
Is this camera horny? Is that what's supposed to be happening?
Well, that's the setup to the first racist joke of the show, which is
Sorry, it's the first racist joke.
It's the first racist joke that I clocked. There may have been many preceding, which is that it's not automatic. It's actually being controlled by this man with a heavy Jamaican accent.
That's right.
I'm not sure that's what's happening, which is very funny, because they also talk about the BBC reporter has a smartwatch that talks in a French accent. And then when they try to get on the elevator is also controlled by an AI. And I believe the elevator's AI has the Jamaican accent.
Yeah, he says, I won't do the accent, but what it says, mind the doors, man, but in a Jamaican accent.
Oh.
But you are right. My note is also first racist joke.
I don't know like how deep you want to get into this, but I think there's supposed to be an underlying comment that, not the most nuanced comment, that multiculturalism has taken over more in England because you have these sort of off comments. The joke, though, isn't it hilarious that we have people of different cultures and races now in England? That's hilarious, isn't it?
Yeah, that definitely comes in the second episode. Like one of the news stories in that one, they open it up along those lines. But yeah, it's like, the elevator's made in Notting Hill Gate. It's like, oh, look how like exotic and filled with minorities Notting Hill Gate is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, well, that's probably true, but I don't think that's a joke.
Yes, shockingly, people of other races exist.
That is like all of the racist jokes in this seem to boil down to the idea of like, can you believe there are other people?
Yeah.
Anyway, they get on board this space station for the tour, and Miss Noah is greeted by a string of people where the joke of this is all of these people introduce themselves. Like, there's just like a 5-minute scene where she meets like 35 people and they're like, hi, I'm Mr. This, I'm Mrs. That. And I'm just like, is this the joke that she just meets 35 people in a row?
I think the big joke is that they're all very specific specialties. So they're like, I'm a doctor of this or I'm a doctor of that. And then the last guy's like, I'm the caterer. That's the joke. You're like, can you believe one's a caterer? That's what the joke is.
But of these, like, 75 characters she meets, 2 of them will be our regular characters, Mr. Carstairs and Mr. Fanshawe, respectively a proton physicist and a neutron physicist.
Do you think those are 2 schools? They don't get along?
Well, where's the electron physicist?
Could have been a trio. They could have been a real Three Stooges.
Well, that's probably how this whole, mix-up happens, is because they're missing the third of their trio.
These physicists present Miss Noah with one of her prizes for winning the bake-off or whatever she won, which is an atomic teapot. That also leads to another racist joke, but I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah, I actually didn't get what the joke is. I'll say this. They have the tea, and he goes, do you want Chinese or Indian tea? Is that what he says?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then she goes, I don't even remember what she says. Let's say she says Chinese, and he just turns the spout. But I don't get what the joke is.
Do you want to cover it, Nico?
What's the joke?
I wasn't 100%, but it's one of 2 things. One is how a teapot looks in those 2 countries, but I think the more obvious one is...
It's the one that's most obvious.
It's a comment on Chinese people's eyes.
Because the teapot is, its spout is quite long.
I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I thought it was like the color of the tea or something. Like, the racist joke is so dated, I don't even understand it.
Because the spout is kind of rectangular, so they turn it horizontally.
Okay, well, good on you guys. I didn't even catch it.
Well, good for you. You got to survive that one.
So let's take a tell. Is that number 2?
That's certainly number 2.
quite emphatically. Number 2.
And then they begin their tour by showing off just this like computer terminal that they use to, I guess there's a storage room on the ship in which you can type numbers in and call up any sort of, it's kind of their replicator. Like you can call up anything you want from storage via this computer terminal. But this is just a running gag that I think is hilarious in that it just brings them the wrong thing every time. But they'll do it like 7 times in a row. It's like, oh, it brought you a fish in a bowl this time, but you wanted tea.
But Luke, I think you're missing what the funniest part of this is that every time it replicates something, the door opens and it makes a fart noise, which is just they go down that well so many times. Like, every time, like, oh, type, and the audience, I'm telling you, they're ripping the walls down. They love it so much.
Nothing gets the good people going like endless repetitive thought jokes. Also, I think, I'm not sure if it was like a button they press or if there's a guy off camera with a mic just making fart noises the entire time.
That wouldn't surprise me.
I think so. I think that's my guess. But I have so many comments on that computer system.
Just how ineffectual it is.
Well, no, so it's, it's whatchamacallit. It's very similar to, there's a store in England called Argos.
Okay.
Where you walk into a store and there's nothing on the shelves. There's just a whole bunch of catalogs on the wall.
Oh.
And you flip through the catalog, you type in whatever code into the machine, and it tells you if it's in stock, and then you go with the code to the cashier, and they do exactly what the machine does.
This is like a high-tech version of the Canadian company, Consumers Distributors, no longer in business.
Oh, that was a thing over here too?
Yeah, you'd go in with a brochure and talk to the man at the front and be like, bring me this, and he'd wander into a warehouse and bring you back something.
It was a lot of like, you can't see the stuff. We promise you we have it, but it's in the back. You can't see it.
Question. Did the guy make a font noise every single time he brought an item?
100%.
I mean, of course.
When I went in,
if you want to get a laugh,
and I was like, you, sir, here's the code for the Captain Picard action figure. Please bring it to me. He would make a fart noise and wander to the back.
Just be like, oh, not this again.
I have to say, it is probably one of the funnier things on this show. I mean, the fart noise is better than the Jamaican elevator.
That's true. At least the fart noise has aged well.
I mean, again, timeless.
yeah.
Timeless.
It's not gotten worse anyway.
Exactly. The teapot joke, not so much. Funning, absolutely.
It's at this point we get an explanation for Britannia 7's mission. Apparently, this ship is going to go on a 60-year journey at 1/10 the speed of light with 500 crew members, I guess, to just explore the galaxy. And this is raised, I guess, some questions as to how 500 people will survive in space. And they show us a couple of the futuristic devices they've created to help. And they're all based around keeping people kind of entertained. One is a pleasure helmet, which is just this like weird looking hat you have to put on. And I guess the premise is it's going to stimulate your neurons in a way that like simulates something you would do on Earth. They're like, why don't you try it on, Miss Noah? We've looked into your background, so we're going to put in a chip for your favorite sport so you can feel it. And it turns out Mrs. Noah's favorite sport is professional wrestling.
Yeah, Nico, I thought of you when this scene came on because I thought that's what Nico would have on his helmet. It would go right to professional wrestling from about, 1998?
Yeah, or, I'll do a little bit of the 2000s, the rise of John Cena, before he gets too cliched.
But they put this little chip into the helmet, and this just causes Mrs. Noah to start shouting and raving and putting the BBC reporter in a headlock, a sleeper hold, if you will.
It's like a VR joke. I mean, we've seen it in so many shows. It's just done with really broad comedy, right? It's like, wouldn't it be hilarious for this housewife, 1, to watch wrestling, 2, to be so into it that she's screaming at the wrestlers and also physically acting it out. That's the joke.
This is the most I liked Mrs. Gertrude Noah, though. When we discovered that she's a big professional wrestling fan, I'm like, I'm interested in this character now.
I agree. It's a first personality trait beyond being like a mildly shrill housewife.
You guys don't like the gags later when you kind of see her underwear? That's the joke?
It is funny that every character in this, maybe the BBC reporter is the only exception, but everyone's just mildly personable. No one has any different personality traits. They're all just okay with those put up with anything you throw at them. No one's upset or angry at any moment. They're all just okay. These aren't entertaining characters.
I actually didn't even know, they give character names. I didn't bother learning them because there's no real difference in any of these characters. One might have a mustache. That's about it. But there's no defining traits in any of these people. They're all just broad people that are there to react to situations. That's all it is.
I agree. Like, I only remember them as like what their jobs were. So it's the two mathematicians, Mrs. Noah, and the reporter guy. That's all I remember.
Well, and in this pilot too, they introduced you to so many characters, and they all get like random lines. I couldn't tell who was going to be a regular until I got to episode 2.
Yeah.
The next device they show her is the Dream Simulator. It's a like big black sarcophagus that you get in. And their theory is that on a 500-year mission, the crew will be so bored they'll forget about dreaming, or they'll forget to, their dreams will be so boring that they need to like be stimulated in their dreams is the concept.
This didn't feel fully baked, did it?
Yeah, but basically what it is just so they can show that they have a like container full of discs that are full of dreams, although all the dreams seem to be celebrities you can have sex with.
But they also make a weird joke, like the whole thing becomes like Robert Redford. She's like, I remember that, like, whoa, slide whistle. But then there's a joke where they say Ringo Starr invented the telephone, and I don't know what the joke was. The joke is that it's been so long that they don't know what's happening in history, or is this something funny in Ringo Starr's history that I don't get?
I think it was a comment either on, like you said, it's been so long people forgot the Beatles, or people just don't remember Ringo Starr. Like, he's the Beatle everybody forgets.
That's the joke, I think. Because that's the thing. They're like,
that's not strong.
We have Ringo Starr or we have Robert Redford, and they're like, who's Ringo Starr? But for some reason, like, Mrs. No's like, I remember Robert Redford, and I'd love to get into the dream sack with him. So she's very excited to like hop into that dream sarcophagus.
Unfortunately for her, it's already occupied.
Yes. The maintenance man, Garstang, is inside, and he's using the dream disc for last year's Mrs. Universe. Did either of you catch her name?
It was Boobies.
Yes, Booby LaFan.
This show is so bad. Oh, man. So, do you think that's her given name?
My favorite part is when they open the door to reveal the maintenance man in there. The only thing he says is boobies. Just repeats it.
It is so weird. That whole joke was just so weird. Anyway, while this tour is happening, back in Mission Control, they receive an emergency Blue 7 alarm. And there's this weird thing where they're like, they don't think anyone is on the space station, so they're not super worried about it. But apparently the only people left on there are Mrs. Noah, Clive from the BBC, our 2 physicists, and this maintenance man. So they're very slow to let anyone know what's happening with the problem happening on this space station. But when they find out they're there, they're like, hey, can you guys try to stabilize the ship so it doesn't crash or something? So we get some weird gag where they're like trying to they're all holding onto like joysticks trying to stabilize the ship, but that doesn't work. And finally they're like, all right, we've got to launch the space station into orbit and park it there so that we can prevent it from crashing. And we get some of the funner miniature work on this show where we get to see this like space station launch. And then once it gets to space, we get this extended gag where Mrs. Noah is on wires floating in 0G trying to use the bathroom.
It's the second time in 2 episodes. Well, this is the first of the 2 times in 2 episodes where she needs to go to the washroom. And I think the joke is, isn't it hilarious that people need to use the washroom?
Either that or that women have small bladders. I don't know which is the bigger thigh slapper.
Yeah, but this scene, like you said, Luke, is really, isn't it funny to have like a middle-aged woman kind of float around on wires and being like, oh, dear heavens.
Well, what my favorite part of that is that, so she's floating around, but these guys are on office chairs with wheels on them. Like, there's nothing that's keeping the chairs to the ground. They're not bolted in. These are just like random office chairs.
I think it checks out.
And they've got like these crappy airplane seatbelts that are keeping them in. And they're just like, oh, what an idiot floating above us.
It is a good point, though. The effort given to the set design is about as minimal as possible. It's just like a slightly yellow room with some desks that have like silver trim on it. That's the future. Oh, and I think there's like maybe one panel on the wall.
I do appreciate how I don't know if it's just in the British shows, but in those 70s sci-fi shows, they imagine the future as being beige. Like, everything is beige, everything is tan, the furniture is tan, the uniforms are beige, like everything is like this off yellow rusted color.
I mean, that's a very good description of the set deck in this. It's all just very bland.
Yeah.
At any rate, Mrs. Noah They do some terrible wire work to simulate zero-G, but she's able to use her bottle of perfume to, quote, squirt herself around and turn on the gyrogravity so they're able to walk around because you can't afford wire work every episode.
Well, that gag's done. I mean, they did it. Everyone laughed. It's time to move on.
You saw Mrs. Noah's skirt. There couldn't be anything funnier. They all go and have a little look out the window, seeing Earth from space. Mrs. Noah comes to the realization that now she's stuck up in space, and she exclaims that she left a chicken in the oven at home. What's she gonna do?
Yeah. I mean, the stakes have never been higher.
This is the big gag they end on, is her realizing she has a chicken in the oven. And then we cut to what was the most shocking moment of the series, is there's the closing credit sequence with a full musical number that is sung and danced by people in spacesuits that look like the Michelin Man.
Yeah, and they do like the full, because the whole theme song at the beginning is maybe like 15 seconds, and then you get the whole like 3-minute song of them dancing to this like ragtime jazz tune. It's pretty bad.
I was blown away that there was like 5 minutes of a dance sequence at the end by these Michelin Men. I was like, what is happening now?
My note at this point was, oh my, this is atrocious.
Very, very rough start to this show.
I'm glad it took you the full 25 minutes to come to that realization, John.
Well, now I know about the tea kettle. I would have said it earlier.
At the time, you just thought it was a commentary on, on fixable.
I thought it was a joke on the different type of tea leaves. I don't know.
All right, let's get into the next episode. Here's the IMDb summary for episode 2, In Orbit.
The venting system will operate in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
What do you think a venting system is?
Mrs. Noah and her friends try to get used to life in space as ground control tries to bring them back home. And that was also courtesy of BGP.
Do you think every episode's going to start with this newscast? Because that's what we get 2 episodes in a row.
Absolutely.
I think this is going to be the framing device because not only are we back at the Far and Wise newscast, it is literally the next day's newscast. Like, this is happening in real time, this show.
Sure.
Again, we get a bunch of news stories off the top that I did not understand. The new London airport is in the Ockies. I don't know what that means.
It's in the Orkney Islands.
So, like, way north of Scotland.
Okay, that's hilarious. That's how big London is, I guess.
In 2050, yeah, why not,
But, Luke, you liked about the robot layoffs, though, right?
Yeah, there's some sort of strike at the robot factory.
Yeah.
And then just a very racist joke.
So, okay, but what is it? I wrote down the names. It said Ram Jam Patel won the boxing championship against, and the name is, correct me if I'm wrong, Peng Dong Schlossman?
Yes.
Yes.
But I don't even know who's that racist to. What is that?
Well, so I think first of all, the laugh track kicks in as soon as they say the name Ram Jam Patel. It's not like they wait till the end of the joke. It's like British boxing champion Ram Jam Patel, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's freaking hilarious."
Yeah, stop. Don't even keep going. I'm already there.
No. The idea that like an Indian guy is A, British, and B, good at boxing, shut up.
Well, and that's how the joke continues, because the second boxer is from Italy, but like you give him the most racist Chinese name possible, and then you're just like, you guys did it again. How do you guys keep hitting it out of the park like this?
You know what? I think the Italian name is a little bit more nuanced in its racism.
because he has the last name Schlossmeyer or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's just a comment on just like to Jordan's point earlier, just like all the multiculturalism. Like he's got this very offensive Chinese name followed by a German name, and he's Italian.
Yeah, I think that is the joke of all these race jokes. Is like in the future we will all have multiculturalism.
Yeah,
there couldn't be anything funnier.
Exactly. Just the idea of multiculturalism is inherently hilarious.
In 1978 UK, it's the funniest thing you can think of.
Well,
anyway, the news goes on to talk about Britannia 7 finally, and kind of the grim fate they're facing up in space. Mission Control calls up to them, and we get to see our 5 lead characters up there, and they're kind of explaining to them that they want to try to bring them down from space, but I guess their re-entry rockets won't work, because if they try to re-enter the atmosphere, they'll all burn up. So they're going back to their secondary plan of bringing in an emergency space rescue craft to send up to get them. but it's stuck in traffic because there's a soccer game happening.
Yeah. I didn't actually even get I mean, I'm not trying to ask too much for this show, but that's sort of like this little side plot is, oh, we can send up a ship to save them. But even for this show, it doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't really set up any jokes, so I didn't even know why they even bothered. Why don't I just spend 5 more minutes on the inflatable bed suits they have that take up the last third of the episode?
Yeah, I mean, I think the joke was more than just like, can you believe something stuck in traffic? Like, that's the joke.
Well, no, I think, I mean, the fact that we have 3 different interpretations of this terrible joke. but my interpretation is just how everybody is obsessed with sports and how that supersedes everything.
Right.
As Ms. Noah then makes a joke being like, ever since we went to the 2-day work week, everyone's obsessed with sports. And I'm like, well, that's just an extra layer of exposition that this entire scenario did not require.
I should also mention, though, that Nico, that joke you said about the 2-day work week, I didn't hear that, and I'm assuming all of us probably picked up a few different jokes that the others didn't hear, because God bless this audience who are having the time of their life. It's so loud and over so many jokes that you can't catch half the dialogue. Am I the only one who felt that way?
Yeah, when it came to jokes, I would try to pay attention to the plot, but like some of those jokes, I also didn't hear the 2-day work week. Some of them just fly past you because there's just so much happening and so much laugh track.
I'll be honest, I watched that 70s show a little bit, and that laugh track completely inoculated me to all future laugh tracks.
Anyway, Mission Control has something to cheer them up, though. They've gathered their loved ones at the BBC studio to speak with them, and they throw to the BBC studio live, where they immediately cut into, I guess, the reporter who's going to do the interviews with their loved ones, telling their loved ones that everyone up in space is going to be stuck there for the rest of their lives in that space coffin.
Mm-hmm. It is actually my favorite scene of the episode comes up, though, when they go to see Mrs. Noah's husband. It's my favorite scene.
Well, let's talk about it. We only really meet 3 of their family. We get to meet Mr. Carstairs' wife, Mrs. Carstairs. He's one of the physicists, and she just starts weeping. She just starts weeping the second she starts talking to him because he's doomed, and he's just like, isn't that funny? She hasn't cried since her rabbit died. And I'm just like, what is happening? Is this the joke?
I was about to say, is the joke that housewives are repressed, or is it a joke that women are hysterical? Because it's one of the two, and I'm not quite sure which one it is.
I thought it was the joke that British people, the stereotype is how repressed they are with their emotions. That's what I thought the joke was. But, I mean, it's anybody's guess.
My guess was the joke was she starts crying, and he's unable to connect the dots between the last time she cried was her rabbit dying, and that he can't connect the dots that she's sad because he's clearly doomed. Like that was the joke I thought, is that he can't connect those two thoughts.
I think you're probably right, Luke.
And that's it. That's the only thing they do with her. They cut to Mr. Fenshaw, and they're like, we wanted to bring your wife, Mrs. Fenshaw, in, but as you might recall, because he says this off the top of the episode, he's like, I'm on vacation today, so I don't have to worry. She's like, your wife left on that vacation to, I believe she was going to Ibiza, so we couldn't get her to come to the studio. And then he's just like, well, what about my brother? Couldn't he come in? And they're like, oh, no, sorry. He also went to Ibiza with your wife because there was an extra ticket.
I think they're having an affair.
I mean, in this show, everyone's wife is having an affair or husband.
Yeah, that's true. Which leads us to the next one.
For some reason, Mr. Noah doesn't need to come to the studio. They've sent a live camera team to his home, which I thought was really...
It's for the gag. He's sitting in his chair.
He's strangling a cat for some reason. Did you see, how is he holding that cat? It looked like he was killing it.
Honestly, I wasn't sure if it was a cat or a Davy Crockett hat, like just like some furry object that he was wrangling.
He's like clutching its head in his hands to the point that I couldn't tell it was a cat until he's just like, I've got the cat with me, and he kind of lifts it up by its head and it like struggles against him. I'm like, what are they doing to that cat? But he's basically there to explain to Mrs. Noah, don't worry about him. He's going to be all right. As she'll recall, their busty young widowed neighbor has started coming around to take care of him while she's gone. And she just like leans into her breasts, like hang over his head to be like, don't worry, Mrs. Noah, I'll take care of your husband.
This was like a classic sort of like Benny Hill kind of joke, like something you'd see in some like just these so broad comedies. Like, wouldn't it be funny if like big breasts are in your face? That's the joke.
What I love is the level of specificity that they add to that joke. Twice he states that he's like, we're in number 36, whatever street, and our neighbor in number 38, whatever street is coming over to visit me in number 36.
Yeah, they want you to know.
Out.
They want you to imagine the geography of this place.
I'm like, oh, you know what? They're next door neighbors. She's not in 42. She's not down the street.
And then the gag finishes up because obviously we're just like, okay, well, we see the gag here. Mr. Noah and this lady are hooking up. And they cut back, and like I think the BBC reporter's like, "Aren't you worried about that, Mrs. Noah?" And Mrs. Noah's like, "Nope, he's old." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, the joke. I think she actually says, "No, he's so much older than her, so I'm not worried." You know, being that she's very naive, that he would want to be with a younger woman. That's the joke, because of course he would want to. She had her breasts all over him.
I just like it's not a joke. Like everyone reacts with a non-reaction, so it's just like there's no comedy to be mined. It's just like the reaction is like, "I don't care." It's like, okay, cool. I guess I won't either.
Luke, you're missing the point, though, because the audience clearly did think it was funny.
I'd rather the naive non-reaction than kind of, as you're referring to, you know, the kind of like semi-angry, like, "Ugh, that's annoying," and then they do nothing about it.
I guess, but like the rest of the episode, we're going to see Mrs. Noah and the BBC reporter have a will they, won't they relationship. And I was just like, at least tie those things together.
I was kind of hoping that there'd be a little bit, if they're going to go for this comedy, they'd go all the way. Like, as soon as Mrs. Noah sees like her husband with the young woman, like a dickie should have flapped up and hit her in the face or something like that. Like, it should just be all out slapstick if that's what they're going for.
At any rate, nobody's from the BBC reporter Clive's family has come, but the BBC does inform him in this call that he'll be staying on full salary in the interim, and he seems quite pleased by that.
Yeah.
Why?
It's just a joke on like how spoiled the BBC is. Defund the BBC. That's what I say.
Well, no, but then they follow it up being like, "We'll reevaluate after a month," and then that's the punchline, is that he's disappointed at that, and I'm like,
I don't know.
okay. Thank you for this comment on BBC's HR policies.
And this scene comes to an end, and they're like, "Well, anyway, you guys want to get something to eat or something?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure, why not?" And we cut to the galley where they decide, let's eat some fresh scrambled eggs. And they punch into the computer and call up the quote space hen or robot chicken that provides fresh eggs on this spaceship. And this, I must say, I was laughing hysterically this entire time.
I have a question, though. So you get this robotic chicken that
Yes.
kind of looks like a chicken that comes out of the table, and they have to put like nutrient pellets into it.
You feed it a nutrient pellet to get a dozen eggs, yes.
Doesn't this seem like a couple too many steps? Couldn't they just ask for eggs out of that replicator thing?
No, if you want them fresh, you got to ask for them out of this robotic chicken, which you feed a pellet, and then out of its like little butthole,
It's
Excuse you, sir. Did you see the size of that butthole?
It was big enough for an egg.
It was gigantic. It was this. It was this massive chicken with a, honestly, like exhaust pipe sized butthole.
And the entire time, the chicken is flapping its robotic wings and making chicken noises, like bark, 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 bark.
So in the credits, it's clearly a guy on a mic making the noises. Kenneth McDonald in the credits, wherever you are. I hope your grandchildren are proud that you were making the chicken sounds.
Listen, he was the highlight of this episode for me. This chicken was the only time I laughed the entire 2 episodes.
Nico, what's his credit as? As voice of Butthole Chicken?
As Space Hen.
Space Hen.
Anyway, the first egg comes out, but the pressure's too high on the space hen, so it fires out the back of the chicken and explodes on a wall behind them. So they're like, wow, we got to turn down the pressure if we want these other 11 eggs. And the BBC reporter, there's this whole joke where he's going to try to like catch it like a backstop baseball player, going to catch this egg shooting out, but they've turned down the pressure, so the next egg rolls out quite casually. And then for whatever reason, the final 10 eggs come out conjoined in a row, like just like all connected.
Like I get that it looked weird, and I think that's the joke. Is like, isn't it weird how the eggs looked? But is that the joke?
It's so funny for some reason.
Well, it was horrifying. I don't know what you're talking about. I was legitimately disgusted by that.
It was, and like Mrs. Noah looks down at this disgusting conjoined egg coming out, and she says, "I don't think much of that." And I lost it.
Well, so first of all, it comes out in this big, chain of eggs that looks like something. And then she's like, I don't like that. So then it gets sucked back up the butthole.
It's because they say, let's start again. I don't like these conjoined eggs. So they punch some command keys in. And yeah, it sucks all 10 eggs back up inside. And then the chicken just explodes.
Honestly, I was watching this. I was like, what is this show? Like, who is this for?
Listen, this part was for me. I loved every second of it. And the scene just ends, and they're just like, well, let's just eat reconstituted eggs and edible plates instead then.
Yeah.
And you see someone eat a plate.
That's it.
Yeah, they spend 5 minutes on this fucking hen, and then it's just like they cut away to a dude eating a plate.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Anyway, the plot continues with Mission Control, and they finally got that space rescue craft out of traffic, and they're getting ready to launch it, and they're like, we better find a pilot to take it up. So we pause to look at a list of pilots who are, for various reasons, unavailable. One of the reasons being probably anti-Semitism.
Why was that one of the reasons?
I think this is probably racist joke number 4, but they like going through a list and they're like, oh, what about this pilot? And they're like, he's available. It's like, oh no, his son's having his bar mitzvah. And then everyone starts laughing.
I didn't catch that one.
And I was like, well, I don't know what the joke is there, but I assume racism is still there. Anti-Semitism this time, maybe.
Still rich. Ripe for humor.
So the only people left to do it are the head of Mission Control and his much younger second in command, who is inexplicably flirting with him the entire time.
What else is she gonna do? She's a woman character in a 1970s broad comedy. That's all she's there for.
He's like a 65-year-old man who just couldn't be less attractive, and she's like falling over herself, and he's like, I'm just like, what is this? I don't even understand. But they missed their launch window when she floods the engine and it won't turn over, so they've got to scrub the mission for 10 hours.
I will say this episode, much more than the first, really hits that misogyny button hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really, yeah, the first one, like, you know, it's in the background, but this one, they really just, like, swing for the fences.
They were getting all the kinks out in the first episode, Nico. Now this is a well-oiled machine. Mm-hmm. They know how to do what they want to do.
Exactly. Like this one, you know, she floods, you know, women drivers floods the engine. We'll see it in a bit, but they make like a fat and an age joke against Mrs. Noah in this episode too.
Well, we should mention that is, I think, going to be a crux of a lot of the humor going through the show. Isn't it funny that one, this lady's a housewife, so she's maybe not the most intelligent woman, is what they're saying. She's a little bit overweight, she's a little bit old, and she's also a woman. And so those jokes combined to this character of like, isn't it funny if she falls over and you get to see her legs? Isn't it funny that she needs to use the washroom? Isn't it funny she doesn't understand how to use things? And it's like, I know it's all played for laughs, but it's such lazy humor, and the joke really is built on, she's not worth much, right? So let's just laugh at her. I
mean, that's the joke of the entire show.
And I mean, look, I realize maybe that's taking it too seriously for what the show is, but at best, this has aged very poorly. At best.
Anyway, let's go back to Britannia 7. The launch has failed, so they decide maybe it's time to check out the sleep quarters. But in order to get there, we need to do a series of gags around the transport system that gets you around this space wheel, which is a hydraulic suction tube transport system. Mm-hmm. And it's very, this goes on for so long, but like the idea is no one knows how to work it because the physicists only know how to use the Mark 1, not the Mark 2 suction tubes. So the British guy like just randomly punches buttons. And what that does is, like, we see they open a door, and, like, the front half of the torso of, like, the maintenance man who is in the galley trying to make himself 2 cups of cocoa is sticking out. And he's just like, I was just in the galley and I got sucked up a tube. What's going on?
And I think this is the first of 2 jokes they make about these tubes. And the overall, I think, joke you're supposed to get from these tubes is, wouldn't it be funny if things flew up your butt?
Yeah.
Because they make that joke twice. Like, people are hanging in the tubes and something comes and they're like, uh-oh. Right up my butt. That's the joke.
Yeah, well, he was making those 2 cups of cocoa. He's sucked up. We're only seeing the front half of his torso. He's complaining he got sucked up. He was trying to drink this cocoa. The entire episode, all this man talks about is making a cup of cocoa.
Yeah.
And then we hear this whooshing sound, and then this actor makes the craziest face, because we're like, uh-oh, a cup of cocoa went up his butt.
What I appreciate about it is, like, that guy does such a crazy face, and then when they repeat the beat 2 minutes later with the BBC reporter, that actor barely reacts at all. He's just like,
well, do you know why? Like, because he's got a butthole like that automatic chicken. Didn't even feel it.
Well, that
fit right in place.
That's just it. Like, they do this whole gag with this maintenance man, and then they pull him out of the tube, and Mrs. Noah informs them, hey, I can work this suction tube thing. It's just like my vacuum at home. So the BBC reporter gets in. He's like, send me to the sleeping quarters. And she punches in some numbers, and what it does is it sucks his pants off first. So his pants are gone. He's enjoying that, though. It looks like he feels some pleasure from that pants sucking off, if you will.
We will.
And then she punches some more numbers in, and we get another whoosh, and he's just like, uh-oh, the other cup of cocoa went up my butt.
The writers were in the room, and they thought, this gag is going to kill so bad. Do you think we can get away with doing it twice? And they said, yes, let's do it. Cocoa up the butt?
There's a reason he said he made 2 cups of cocoa. They needed that second one.
Well, they don't really do any joke once in this show. Like, every single joke comes in like a shotgun blast. Like, it's
Yeah, Nico, you have 30 minutes to fill.
30 minutes. So it's like, cocoa up the butt, let's do that twice. Space hen, all right, let's have him like shit out the wrong kind of eggs 3 different times. We'll milk that for 5 minutes. You know, sports, let's make references to that 3 times in 2 minutes.
But they finally do get to the sleeping quarters. We cut away. We never see how they figure it out, but what we see is their BBC reporter slide down a little slide into this room, followed by Mrs. Noah slides down behind him into this sleeping quarters they're going into. And I don't know if either of you caught this, but there was like this one moment where like you actually saw the actors helping each other. Because when Mrs. Noah comes down that slide, clearly they hadn't tested it before. And like her dress goes way too high up her body. And like the guy playing the BBC reporter like really quietly sneaks behind her and pulls down her dress as she stands up because he's like, this is bad. Like it was this one moment where you got to peek behind like this actor actually trying to prevent some humiliation to the actress. And I was like, that's kind of nice.
Oh, I didn't notice, but there's a lot of other scenes that could have prevented some humiliation of her.
Well, that's the thing is like this was not meant as a joke, and you could see one actor helping another out, and it was like the one moment where I was just like, oh, these are real people trying to do their job, and I appreciate that quick vantage point.
You see, I 100% thought that was a joke. Like, I think you're right in hindsight, but at the time it was just like, I guess we can see up her butt now. Like, this is funny.
Well, I was waiting for him to make a joke about it too, but all he does is he like tries to very casually sneak behind her and pull down her dress. And I'm like, oh, I think this is just a nice person doing a nice thing for his coworker.
I have another thing I could suggest. They could have also just done another take.
No, they don't have time. They don't have the money. One take.
Yeah.
The audience wouldn't have laughed as hard the second time.
That's true.
At any rate, they're in these sleeping quarters. It's controlled by an AI that calls itself Slumber Control, which is just there to be difficult for them to ask questions to.
Wouldn't this been funnier though if they had done another like hilarious like ethnic stereotype on The Voice?
Yeah, they really gave up on the idea they were going to do a different ethnic stereotype for every AI voice. I'm sure it'll be back though. Don't worry, they'll remember it. All
right, I'm a little worried. I'm not going to get my fill of racist jokes.
Jordan has a racist bingo card going.
yeah, it's not quite full.
At any rate, Mrs. Noah arrives, and once again, just like this period of time last episode, she has to use the little girl's room. So the robot directs her to the bathroom, and what she discovers in that bathroom is that the toilet is on the wall next to the ceiling.
Is the joke here how funny it is that women need to sit on the toilet? And because this is inconvenient, she now can't sit on the toilet? Is that the joke? Or is the joke just toilets are funny?
It's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Because, yes, the toilet's on the wall. It's clearly impossible to use. But when she tells Clive to come in and see this toilet, Clive's like, well, a little bit more of a problem for you than it is for me. And I was just like, are you telling me you can pee onto the roof and not, like, you're just going to urinate in your own face, sir?
Also, they do a little joke there where there's like this tiny little trash can under the sink that he's like, puts under the toilet. He's like, here, stand on this and take a piss.
I know. I was like, what is happening? There's some improv. There's a little bit of improv in the scene he came up with.
Yeah, he's helping his fellow actor out there.
A little. He's like, I saw this tiny garbage can. I thought I could do something with it.
But guys, this is a big setup for the real payoff of magnetic boots. So like you were thinking, how are they gonna nail this joke? Nothing could be funnier than this toilet in the wall. How are they gonna top it? But there's magnetic boots.
Pure comedy, Jordan. We get to hear her. We can hear off-screen sound effects of her climbing a wall.
That's it. She puts on magnetic boots and is able to climb up the wall to use the washroom, which still doesn't explain why they would have put the toilet on the wall.
Oh, they explain,
other than the ship thinks it's funny.
No, they explained that.
Did they?
You have to wait until the rotation's in the right area to use that bathroom.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, makes sense. Checks out.
That's what they
I
say.
pull back all comments.
Can you wait till the rotation gets to the right angle, or do you need to use the magnetic boots?
All right.
Jordan, it all checks out.
Yeah, you're right.
This scene ends with them. Now she's used the bathroom. Now what's going to happen? The AI informs them that since they've entered the sleeping quarters, they're now sealed in there for a standard 8-hour sleeping cycle. But there are no beds to be seen, so if they want to get a bed, they're going to have to follow the, what is it called? The bedtime procedure. And that starts with phase 1, decontamination.
It's like a long, broad scene of them putting on kind of these big red bag, kind of shaped like bodies, but more like balls, that there's a lot of jokes of like, they gotta zip each other up and take their clothes off. But it's a lot of like, isn't it funny that they're physically stuck in these bags? That's the joke.
Yeah, we get to watch them do slapstick comedy of stripping naked inside of a bag, and then maybe they'll kiss, maybe they won't.
Yeah, which was weird, right? Because like, is that what the audience wants? Like, maybe the reporter and her are gonna fall in love?
I don't know. I think they just think it's very funny to see them, I don't know, maybe kiss.
All this work that they do of this, the joke of them moving around the bags and stuff, it has the best payoff, though.
Yeah, so once they've stripped themselves nude, the bags inflate with air, because that's what we were waiting for. Like, it was clearly they were going to inflate to big air balloons, and they jump around like they're like, whoa, this is full of air, isn't that crazy? And then the AI announces to them that it's time for the venting system to start, now that the decontamination is complete. At which point, both bags start extruding air out of them, and they just make the biggest farting noise possible.
But the air also comes out of their butts.
Well, of course.
I was about to say, Luke, you missed the most key part of that. The venting out of their buttholes.
Also, I mean, the air is also now like a shade of white for some reason. And
it's space.
And it's just like, there's a big fart noise, and then the episode ends, and I was like, this is just me, but I was just like, wait, that was just phase 1. We're just gonna, like, it felt like we were stopping in the middle of a series of gags we were about to watch, but it's just like cuts. The episode just cuts to a cold stop.
No, they had to end up, that was the high note. It wasn't going to get better than that. And they said, if we have 2 people farting at one time, the audience is going to be laughing so hard into the next episode. Just cut it there.
Also, you see the farts.
Yeah, they're visibly, they're visible. It's so funny.
Yeah. It's the full audio visual presentation.
It's really using the TV medium to its fullest.
Precisely.
All right. Well, I mean, those are the first 2 episodes of Come Home, Mrs. Noah. I don't know. Did we cover it all? Is there anything you guys needed to talk about still that I didn't cover?
I do have one thing in the first episode, particularly. I really watching it. My impression of it was that this is how North Americans sound when they do fake British accents. That entire first episode, like their call sign is tip top. So it's like tip top to Aki Aki, tip top. Tip top. Oh yeah, when they test out the computer, they talk about how the first time they use it, all they got were crumpets. And they say, it's like, good Lord, great Scott, all this. I was like, oh my God, this is exactly how it sounds like when people are like, oh my God, you're British. Let me do this tip top crumpets.
Nico, just for you and me, but so it's
Sure.
When Michael does impersonations of you, that's what this sounds like?
Exactly. I, honest to God, I think I've eaten one crumpet my entire life, and people just throw that at the British wall at me every time. I just get suffocated with crumpet references.
Listen, I'm sure the listeners can earn in that joke. They've heard Michael on this podcast twice, and hearing that out loud, that's probably not a surprise to them. All right. Well, you guys should we rate these episodes? What do you want to, let's talk about the pilot. Nico, I don't know if you remember, but we do this out of 10 stars. If you want to lead us off with the pilot, what do you want to give this episode of 10 stars?
Oh my God. This one, actually, I was able to watch all the way through, which I don't think I can say for the second episode. So for this one, I'm going to give it, I don't know, let's say 4 stars.
4 stars. I think I'm going to go, this episode, I was just so weird. I just kept waiting for it to like make sense to me, but it never quite did. I was just like, I can't believe this continued being a show. I'm going to give it 2, I think.
Luke, I can't believe it. We have the same score. I'm also giving it a 2. This show is somehow less funny than it seems. Like, us describing it is funnier than actually watching the show. It's just like a litany of unfunny scene after unfunny scene. So 2 out of 10. That's being generous.
All right. Well, what about episode 2, In Orbit?
Again, this one, like, there was a bit in the middle where I just completely shut off and didn't watch it. I had to like come back to it. At least the first one had a narrative that moved forward. This one just got bogged down in chickens shitting out eggs and people trying to take a piss. So I'm going to give this one a... Can I do halves?
Sure.
Yeah.
Joe, I'll do a 1.5 for this one.
Oh, wow. That's a big drop.
Well, I'm going
Yeah.
way up on this one. No joke. That chicken had me laughing so hard the entire time. That was for me. That chicken sequence was for me. I'm going to give this a 6.5.
I hated
man.
that chicken so hard.
I couldn't stop laughing. It was so fun. As soon as it shot that egg across the room, I'm like, oh, this is for me, everybody.
I'm going to give the second episode a 2.5. I'm going to go up slightly, not because it's a better show, but because I like that they spent at least a third of the episode setting up a fart joke. So 2.5 out of 10. Again, way more than this show should get.
I mean, I cannot disagree harder with Luke's score for that second episode.
I know. He's crazy.
I love that chicken. I laughed so hard. I'm like, this show's finally clicking. Here we go. This fucking chicken sequence.
On a side note, a lot of times when we're watching these shows, and we've watched some stuff that's okay, some stuff that's good, some stuff that's pretty bad. This obviously is in the bad quarter. And a lot of times when I'm watching these shows, I like to see how long it's going to take for me to get distracted before I just like start looking at my phone or looking at my computer. This one was about 1.5 minutes. It took me into the show where I was like, oh, what else is happening in the world?
I'm not going to lie. The first time I tried watching this, I fell asleep, I think, when Mrs. Noah, just after the Jamaican elevator, just after that, I fell asleep.
Nico, I pictured you with your shirt off, asleep on the couch, and a pizza on your chest.
You're missing the key part, which is the drool coming down my chin.
Right.
Jordan, he was asleep on his couch shirtless with crumpets on his chest.
That's true. That's true.
You're not... Unfortunately, Jordan is very, very accurate. I did fall asleep eating pizza watching this stupid thing.
Well, that's something anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that about wraps it up. Nico, thank you so much for joining us again.
And sorry.
Thank you. I was about to say thank you for forcing this horror story into my life.
I mean, Jordan saw British and he thought you, so you had to come.
You're our expert.
I don't think anyone's an expert on that hot garbage.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you can get a hold of us if you know anything about Come Home, Mrs. Noah. The email address here is continuumdrag@gmail.com. And on Instagram and Twitter, we're going to have some clips from this show. I mean,
Farting.
if I have my way,
Farting,
it's all
boobs in the
It's all
face,
robot
you have-
chicken.
Yeah. Chicken shooting out eggs. And I mean, again, this is
So
one of these
funny.
shows where if you watch it in 10-second clips, you're like, that's kind of cute and funny, but it's not. I beg everyone, don't watch this. It's not funny.
Yeah, it's not more than its whole is not more than its pieces, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can follow that at Continuum Drag is the handle on Instagram and Twitter. But that's it. That wraps it up. So, listener, thank you for joining us. And Jordan, I'll see you next week. We'll see if Mrs. Noah comes home.
We should end on a high. Like the show.
I was about to say, hopefully she stays up there.
Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Rex Seidler. Produced by Jordan Dullock and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Hughes.